in cities, we should say. So the conversations are a bit more challenging down here, right? And I say all that to say that like the people around me had my parents have a middle class, nice lifestyle. When they get pulled over, it's by Officer Hernandez or something like that, some Hispanic last named person. A cop is usually a Latino in this part, and so you don't get this sort of like you don't get quite the racial dynamic, and it's a lot different in this section. So the people around me were kind of well insulated from understanding the sort of sea change in American politics that was ushered in by Trump making those statements. And the sort of great peril that I found them all to be in, I don't think they quite understood at that moment. And maybe they don't now either, because I'm really the only overtly political person in my family at this point. But I think by the time uh, the first Bernie campaign was done, I had already considered myself a full-on communist, and I think maybe I was still toying with the idea of like, where do I fall on the XY axis? Is it like anarcho-communist? Is it like more anarchist, or is it do I believe in some sort of reform? And but I mean, if you just read enough Marx, if you just read enough like George Jackson, or if you read Fanon or Amy Césaire, or if you even start to understand, like Du Bois on some level, like all this stuff should speak to an argument against reform. And so anyway, so what my tendency at this point, I'm a Marxist Leninist. I have some Maoist tendencies. I don't particularly care for the infighting or argumentative aspects of MLs versus MLMs. Um, but I definitely am a Marxist Leninist. But I've also like sort of recently broke with a lot of the tendencies that have emerged. Like I'm not a patriotic socialist.
You sure?
Excuse me.
I heard that you was.
Oh, did you hear that I was? I was yeah, yeah, some fucking assholes from CPI or something probably said some shit online. Yeah,
I'm only messing. I'm messing.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure y'all have kept up with that nonsense that's gone on. I mean, it's wild, man. That like not only was CPI a registered cult, but like now the guy that they look up to and read was also a cult leader in Lyndon LaRouche. I mean, it's like they all. I don't know, man. It's sad on one level because you look at them and you know that they're like I don't even think they would deny at this point that like CPI was a sex cult or that maybe they probably would on that if they're still trying to defend CPI, but they definitely can't defend like the
I
Lyndon
mean,
LaRouche shit. The history is all there. So
even if it wasn't consciously a sex cult, but it did obviously turn out to be that way. So
yeah,
the way I see that whole organization, that effort from everybody who probably had the best of intentions, is the same way that I see practically every single organization by communists that don't specifically focus on base building dual power. That's serving the people. I mean, if you don't have them like internal principles and practice with your organization, like I'm not going to be that impressed. I mean, that's what I'm trying to build with my comrades, and so that's how I see with that. It's just again, if you want actual change, you've got to serve the people and meet their needs. That's basically just all my practice and all my life is about now. So it's always a shame just to see wasted potential in any way, shape, or form. But it's even worse when you referenced in social commentary on Twitter about this MAGA communism. It's even a
yeah,
shame when these
yeah,
viral trends get swept up into people's vulnerability to try and find sense in this world, and and like the society is so. I mean, I'm going off on one, but the society focuses on individualism and like machismoism and the ego so much that obviously these trends of fucking MAGA communism and not speak out to people who are feeling so vulnerable and small and weak. So, it's just a sad sight either way. But I mean, I've never said anything about it on Revolutionary Lumpen Radio. That was a first, so I just felt like clearing the air there while we were on there.
Well, I think it's wild, man. Like you can go through an entire, 4-year degree on political science, and they don't ever probably tell you that like political parties can turn into cults very quickly, and how there seems to be a correlation there between like political activism and the formation of cults. And just in the past like the past few years, I mean, what have we had? We've had DPI dissolve, we've had Black Hammer dissolve, and I mean, there's a lot of folks who wouldn't even claim them as part of the organized left. I get that, but there's still people that are like, proclaiming to be on the left who are, whether they, I mean, at this point now, I mean, if you think of someone like Caleb Maupin, I mean, his legacy has to be that he had a registered business that was actually a cult. You know, you think about someone like Ghazi, who led Black Hammer, and that dude, he's been arrested and charged, and he was holding someone captive, and there was all sorts of reports of like sexual deviancy happening within that organization. That was,
What?
yeah, no, Black Hammer. There's shit that's gone on there too, and it makes me think back to something like. Like something like the Jim Jones stuff. I mean, like I've read there's an article that was written by I'm only going to say there's an article that was on Cosmonaut for a while that was like the left has a cult problem, and it's kind of true when you think about it, man. Is these leftist orgs, they come up, they dissolve, and in the wake they they stain a lot of the uh I don't know. I mean, like you could look up and I mean think about Revcom right now. I mean, Bob Avatian is still out there leading Revcom, and if you ever join Revcom, if you go to any one of their meetings, they just want you to read Bob Avakian's books. And they're going to talk about Bob Avakian, about how he's a great man and he's the only one prepared to lead the revolution. And, that's a cult, but there's a problem, like ultimately. And I mean, I don't know how to form an episode on this and stuff, but if we're talking about all this, I mean, I think that there is the left has a cult problem. And,
Yeah, defo.
and yeah, and it's wild. I mean, I don't know, man. Like I joined Black Hammer for a second, and it was wild. I was on a phone call on a Zoom meeting when they announced that. I mean, stop me if you're not familiar with like Black Hammer and what they did. I mean, I guess for listeners that aren't, they found some land in Colorado, and they talked about building a city called Hammer City, and they created a GoFundMe, uh, had several $1,000s that were donated there. They went to Colorado to this land that they found, and they camped out there, and some of their members almost died because of just the elements and shit. And it was a
What?
disaster of a trip. Yeah, y'all can look this stuff up. This really happened, man. And so, but I say all that because, like, when they announced that, I was on that Zoom call with them, um, and Ghazi announced this, which, by the way, he had like a portrait of Karl Marx with a clown nose. I mean, in his background,
What?
which that should be the first indication from this motherfucker, right? But anyway, so there's that aspect. But like, he literally played back a scene from a Netflix documentary called Wild Wild Country about some Indian folks who had found a plot of land, maybe in the Midwest or maybe in Oregon or something somewhere, and it was a literal documentary about a cult. And that was the first call where he pitched this idea of Black Hammer, um, I'm sorry, of Hammer City, and buying the land, and but that's like straight out of like a cult 101. If you know anything about cults, they try to isolate you from your family. They try to get you to live like in a place where they control, or they do something wild like that where they buy a plot of land and they go full like David Koresh or something, or full sort of Branch Davidian, or
Yeah.
uh, sovereign citizen thing like that happened in Ruby Ridge. That's what they were trying to do there. That's what the situation in Waco was about. But inevitably these sort of like these cults turn into something sexually fucked up, and that it name every cult that we've talked about. There's been some degree of like sexual misconduct. Uh, so y'all didn't know we were going to talk about cults and all sorts of crazy shit. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
uh, yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, a materialist standpoint would say it's not that you can just, have an organization and then it turns into a cult and then everybody does all sexual deviance. It's just a case of, it takes two to tango. These people are going into these places without very much self-awareness, and they are like, again, vulnerable. They are like the consumers, they're looking to consume and they're looking to have a hobby, they're looking to do these things, and they're not taught to sat down and learn to be a historical materialist, learn dialectical materialism, obviously make sense of the world, or you'll make a bumbling fool of yourself, then it's going to be taken advantage. And like, I mean, all sexual, all violence, like, um, y- I'm trying to think of the proper word from it. Like, even crimes of passion, stem from what happens in fucking bourgeois society anyway. It's what happens. Like, soldiers kill and rape and pillage and shit, like, and they do it legally. And, people look for fucking power wherever they can, and they fucking punch down. And this is fucking why we need a fucking utopia, and why we fucking. I mean, it's just crazy that obviously the the internet hasn't existed forever. It's somewhat new. So like Marxism and socialism, communism, discourse, which all should be the same thing, but there's some reason separate nowadays. All these things like are new online, and people are dealing with it in different ways. And it's just shit to see this whole MAGA phenomenon pop up, because you have people like us ended up talking about all cults and things to fucking warn people to just obviously make sense, like, be careful.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think anytime you're trying to, I don't know, build off of a conservative populist movement, you're ideologically baseless to start at that point, because populism is something that codifies around a sort of vanishing signifier, like once the primary grievance that everyone is sort of organizing in a populist way around, once that kind of dissolves, that movement kind of dissolves with it most of the time. Or it's unpredictable in the way that one might be able to steward it at that point. I mean, if you think about, I mean, the left has dealt with this for a long time. If you think about Occupy, I mean, there was no, party of vanguard revolutionaries ready to step to the front and lead the people to a proletarian revolution. It was just like there was nobody there to do that, and any sort of attempt was spontaneity, or at least tailing the masses at that point, which are incorrect by doctrine and practice. So yeah, I mean, if you look at what the Canadian truck drivers with the vaccine mandate shit, that shit went away really quick, and it went away as quickly as it like came about. I mean, there was like some U.S. attempts to start something similar, but that I don't think anything ever came of that. But the point is that like that stuff's gonna vanish, and so any sort of like uh, thorough revolutionary practice is not going to revolve around, especially a populist sentiment from the right. And I don't understand any sort of communist who is attempting to sort of unify with uh, MAGA people at this point. I mean, it's dumb, dude. But like, I just see like these different. And I hate to even like say that they're different factions of the left, because they're not really like factions or a party, or they're like a singular group of like five individuals that have an outweighed sort of effect on the discourse online.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of 12-year-olds in a Discord server that that are into magic communism because it's like aesthetically cool, and I don't know, it's not straight
Pure
principled
opportunism.
Marx. Yeah, it's opportunism, man, but I also think it's like there's a lot of members that follow those guys that are like just not that are not revolutionaries. They're they're either people who are young who are part of a group mentality, or they're people who are focusing on not on like class war, or not on class solidarity, or not even on struggling to bring about like a dictatorship of the proletariat. Like none of these principled ways or reasons of going about revolutionary work, they're sidetracked and focused on, things like Malthusianism, or green fascism, or degrowth, or any number of things that, yeah, sure, Marx wrote about these things, but like that's not the point, you know. It's like the point is class war, you know. The point is not misguided views on Russia leading you to think that Russia is waging an anti-imperialist aggressive front against Ukraine. You know, like there's all sorts of weird, incorrect shit that, like, on its face, it's like, how did anyone actually like do an ideological 720 into this like misguided fucking weird dumb opportunist sort of way of going about things, you know, like, and I won't name any more names on this stuff, but you know as well as I know that this whole patriotic socialism shit has turned into MAGA communism. uh that like a lot of these MAGA communist people are you know, more, if they're not like studying degrowth and Malthusianism and if they're not doing that, then they're like, I don't know, like fucking reading Dugan, you know? And so yeah, it's a bunch of shit that's not communism going on by people still calling themselves communists, you know.
So thank you for those comments and those thoughts. Again, it's something I've thought about a lot and haven't really managed to put into words, but yeah, I agree with a lot of that, and I could even expand on it further, but they honestly don't deserve it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you're the host of No Easy Answers podcast, are you not? What can you tell us about it?
Well, I started a show called No Easy Answers, and it's a Marxist podcast about politics, philosophy, and the human condition. And it started during May of 2020, towards the height of that first wave of COVID, when everyone was kind of afraid. And I was living in New York, and there were, you know, semi trucks of coolers for bodies at that point, and people were dying all around. And I went to a very existential place, man. I started really thinking about meaningfulness and not necessarily purpose and sort of teleological sort of way, but in terms of like, uh, you know, this life, what does it mean when like when a lot of your identity has been stripped from you? As a musician, I lost a whole season worth of gigs I had booked. You know, I didn't feel inspired to write or play or make any sort of music, and with that, a lot of like my answers to the question of what do I do now went with that. You know, there was no community at that point, so there was no like stepping out and performing. There was no going to do sound and help others play because there were just no performances. So, so you know, I went to a very existential place of like, you know, what did I do before music consumed my life, and what does it mean to not have the people around you that you want to have around you? What does this in this space of reflection mean? And so I had a few episodes where I started like talking about like moral theory and sort of the influence Christianity has had on moral theory and my own sort of personal sort of thought processes on my own belief system of atheism and what exactly that means. And but No Easy Answers quickly kind of evolved into a an interview based podcast where I speak to mostly Marxist professors about different philosophers. We had the great Todd May on the show on episode number 16. I've had other wonderful philosopher friends or people that I can call friends now, which is great, like Daniel Tutt, when we talked about Nietzsche, Ronald Wiener talking about Heidegger and Nietzsche, people like Benjamin Teitelbaum, where we spoke about his book, War for Eternity. So a lot of, you know, authors, people who have written books about philosophers or about current contemporary politics. But No Easy Answers is something where it's largely a function off of like what I am interested in or what I happen to be interested in during a phase. So there's 4 episodes just on death and interrogating what the meaning of death is. There's
Holy shit.
yeah, there's 6 to 8 episodes on fascism where I talk to, you know, Benjamin Teitelbaum, Dr. Ronald Wiener, talked to Dr. Richard Polt, who wrote a book on Heidegger, Daniel Tutt on Nietzsche, right? There's also, damn, I'm forgetting his name now. Gabriel Rockhill on fascism as well. Um, and yeah, so there's a ton of that stuff there. I did a little bit of work on like some of the like I did 3 episodes on Dugan and a little bit
Why,
on
how,
Julius
how the
Caesar.
fuck do you even know half of these people? Like, did you study them in the
Oh,
past,
dude.
or you like, have you always been into philosophy, or did you pick it up later on in life? Like, where did that come from? Just knowing these people and these different resources and thoughts.
Well, I always read philosophy because, like, if you look on my camera up top there, those are philosophy books that my mom got me when I was a kid. She was an English
Oh,
teacher.
holy smokes!
So,
There
so like,
must be at least 25 books there.
yeah, like right in front of that red spot is a Lenin book, but like the rest of those are Western philosophy and the canon and stuff. But like, not that I always read those, but I always attempted to read those. And philosophy seemed like, the most challenging stuff to read that made the least amount of sense and only smart people understood or what have you. So I was kind of fascinated with being able to do that or to
So would they
understand.
just be like collected works of a certain
Yeah,
branch, or
it's
miscellany, or mixed, or what?
it's everything from like Plato all the way to like Jameson. So there's all the Aristotle stuff in there. There's Marx, there's Nietzsche, there's Spinoza, there's regrettably, I don't think there's Sartre in there, but there's some Dostoevsky. So there's a little bit of everything, kind of the primary works of all of them. Um, so I've always had hard copies of the stuff, and I've carried this stuff around the country before I moved back to Texas. And so those books are like stuff that I don't know, just always tried to read and understood little bits and pieces of it. When the pandemic came around, though, it was maybe the first time as an adult where I had, when not being able to make music and having a lot of things, I sense of identity taken from me. I was like, well, I did read philosophy a lot, and so why don't I go back to that? And so that's kind of how that started. But in terms of how I knew all these people, man, my friend Max really like helped me with this. Max, the host of Working People, because I told him like I mean, there is a bit of narcissism that comes with like being a musician to like put your name on a T-shirt and pay to print that out, knowing that you can sell those, right? To place your face on the cover of an album, to advertise and promote your own shows. They're kind of
I mean,
self-aggrandizement.
it's probably nearly every kid's dream, like in the Imperial Court. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if
Right.
every kid didn't want that.
No, totally. I mean, my nephew's like 10 and he wants to be a YouTuber, So yeah, there is something very individualistic and self-involved and about living in the Imperial Core and being all these things totally. And I have my own sort of battles with that as well, And I say all that to say that like in talking to Max, I was like, man, I don't know if I feel comfortable and like because I feel like what kind of audacity does it take a person to like read a book and then like say, hey, author of this book, I'd like to talk to you and challenge some of your ideas. Like there's a real
Yeah,
fucking
obviously
narcissism
get
and
it. Like,
entitlement that comes with that shit. But he was like, look, man, he was like, if you're thinking deeply on a topic and you have, questions that are like you have the sincerity to know and it's upright thought and that you seek to know the truth and like you are asking the question in such a way that like is in good faith to find it like if you're really asking these questions from a genuine and sort of interlocutor sort of point, then those people should be delighted to hear from you and they will almost certainly say yes to an interview. So I reached out to Todd May and I've been kind of fearless about reaching out to anybody else since Todd May because the work of Todd May was just life changing and sort of belief rocking. I'd say like it challenged a lot of the ways that I felt about going about life and kind of made me better. It was like it did what self help books are supposed to do, which they're just a bunch of weird Eastern Buddhist sort of derived mindfulness bullshit in a lot of ways that I've found anyway. But Todd's books on death and on a meaningful life, a significant life, a fragile life, all really did really amazing things. They really enriched my life by reading those books. And I went on to read his book on Rancière, his book on the ethics of like post-structuralist anarchy. Um, and I want to say one or two more books of Todd's stuff, but he's a philosopher that means a lot to me.
Yeah, I empathize with you. I feel I have too much fun on the mic because I feel exactly how you do it with many of my guests, but you know, you've also got to somewhat like be professional in a way and just try and ask interview questions and not get carried away. But even though you love the person, you could speak to them for hours. Yeah, it's always difficult, and like yourself, and many of the questions with Revolutionary Lumpen Radio, looking at the Lumpen classes and their revolutionary contributions throughout history, and shoving that in the faces of everybody who looks down on the Lumpen. I've had the same way where I've had to speak to people to kind of make sense of it. I've often found like this microphone's there so I can just scream into the fucking abyss when I'm sick of capitalism.
Yeah, man.
But
Sometimes you need to do that for sure.
so it also says on your profile here, professor. In fact, no, well, not that
Yeah.
question. Let's go on to working people pod because we spoke a little bit about it in the intro there, but we might want to add anything on. So, what can you tell us about working people pod? What kind of role have you played in such a series?
Well, Max found me in November of 2020, and Max found me via his COVID episode. He put out a call for all the folks who had worked, essential workers, during that time to record a monologue or something to send it to him for publication. And so I sent him one, but I sweetened my audio before I sent it to him, and I use a nice mic and that sort of stuff. Like what I do by trade is I'm an audio engineer. I went to school for that stuff. I worked in music for years, and so um, it's it's just what I do, you know. And so the stuff that he received from me was already like it was already cooked. It was pre-sweetened. It was ready to be published. He didn't need to compress it. He didn't need to EQ. He didn't need to cut any breaths out of it, stuff like that. But he basically was impressed with the way that my audio file sounded compared to everybody else's, and was like, do you want to be a producer of a show? And I was like, yeah, I would love to do that because I need a reason to work with my music equipment because it was during COVID, and so I wasn't writing or recording or really doing much at that point. So Max brought me in. This is the second season that I'm with him now. I was with him for all of season 4, and we're in the middle of season 5. We have like 24-ish episodes into season 5 now. And Max, yeah, like so Max is really consistent with this stuff. That's not even counting bonus episodes. There's a lot of bonus episodes that he sends me as well that we put up on our Patreon. And Max is just brilliant. I'm just gonna take a moment and like talk about Max, and maybe it'll be embarrassing to the guy or what, but I'm sure that I'm not the only guy out there who's singing Max's praises. But like Max, has like a literary mind in that like he can sometimes come up with metaphors that are brilliant, that are like so illustrative of like what he's trying to evoke and the points he's trying to make. That it really is just like a joy editing anything the guy comes up with. And
Oh, you
anyway,
mean like 'cause sometimes they can talk in the intro and they can be like explaining it like that deep and serious, and then coming in with like boom boom with this like deep poetry thing almost.
yeah, because Max, his passion is literature, so and
Oh, is
specifically
it?
Russian literature. Yeah, he is
Oh,
like a
that makes
PhD in
sense now.
comparative literature. So yeah, so the guy can speak and the guy can write in such a way that like I there's nothing he does that I won't try and absorb and read or watch. So and if I was not a producer for his podcast, I would be a fan and I would still be taking in his work as well. But yeah, Max does a lot of stuff too. I mean, he's editor in chief at the Real News Network, and they have a ton of content they put out. And and in the past, Max and I have like, I mean, I'm happy and proud to say that I've helped Max pull off some live streams that have like, like for the with the boys at the Valley Labor Report, Max helped them raise $74,000 for the striking miners in Alabama, and I want to say he raised something like $14,000 on a live stream for the striking Kellogg's workers. and
Damn.
Yeah, and you know when my mom had a health scare and needed help, I mean I had a GoFundMe and Max was kind enough to help me raise some money for her as well. I mean, so like Max is a comrade that like has been there for me and is there for people around him all the time. And he's such a sweet dude. Like half the reason he's tired all the time is just because he just doesn't want to let anybody down, and he kind of overstretches and overextends himself in order to uh, keep creating content on this brutal schedule. And I'm just like, amazed week in, week out at the prolificness that Max of Max's work. How prolific the guy is just nothing short of astounding.
Yeah, yeah, cool, cool.
Yeah.
So can you
Well,
tell us about your music? What instruments do you play? How important has it been in your life?
well, music is like pretty much been at the core of everything I've done and everywhere I've gone. I mean, the people in my life that I'm privileged to know have probably come to me from music. Um, you know, I started out as just like an engineer and made my way into being an artist, and it's been the sort of guiding practice of everything I've done. Like part of the reason why I'm even a person that's mildly, sort of familiar with folks on the left at this point is because, I one, I am a musician and I've come up with like the music for working people and the music for the Valley Labor Report. But two is like, that I have this capability of editing and producing content. That I do that is something that has gained notoriety for me. Not that I mean I don't really even care about the notoriety. It's funny. It's like I just wanted my people to listen to my music, and I don't have nearly the following on my music side that I do on the politics side of things. Um, but I would say that music is by far the most important thing to me, and it's the thing that like has necessitated me learning the skill sets that people know me for. So like video creation or audio content or no easy answers or working with Max, working people on live streams on occasion. All that stuff. The only reason why I know all that stuff is because I was a musician who wanted to record myself and wanted to, play back my own songs and be able to like take the music and tones that I hear in my head and place them between speakers. And it's just been that process that I've always tried to practice and get better at. And during the process of that, I was able to help other people do similar things, uh, and I also like in terms of, like with music, I it also like it brought me a lot of professional success. Like I worked in broadcast sales for a long time. And I say why that's important is because like, at this point now it's like I worked in business to business, so I critique businesses and I know all about like audio video businesses because I am a musician and I come to it with a creative sort of standpoint that works, but it's at the end of the day it's a creative science. And I guess I'm kind of losing my train of thought, but I would say that music is sort of the connectivity of every channel of my life, including what I do professionally as a day job, including what I do with Max and the podcast and No Easy Answers. And it's what I teach. I teach the technical side of music at a university in Corpus Christi. Um, and I've just had a lot of experience with it. I lived in Nashville for about 10 years and I worked as an engineer in the country music scene there. I worked on some stupid big records for a moment. And and it's like I don't know, somehow it's earned me some like cred. I mean, people take I lived in Nashville and worked as an engineer. That goes a long way. It has a lot of purchase for it. And then I moved to New York and I lived in Woodstock, and there's a lot of really cool music that's come out of there. I produced an album that was recorded in the basement of, I don't know if y'all are familiar with the band in Big Pink, but I was the guy who was like the technician for the studio owner that is in the basement of Big Pink, where Dylan recorded the basement tapes, and where the band recorded their first album, music from Big Pink. Um, so there's a lot of cool shit that I've done, and it's just it's I'm just like really fortunate to have been in a lot of really cool places at the right time, man. Um,
Yeah,
and yeah, so all that to say, man, music made all that possible, you know. So it is the most important thing, you know.
sick. So what are you saying? You teach music at university now?
Yeah, I teach recording techniques right now, which is basically like the history of studios, the history of certain gear manufacturers, the way the technology works, microphones, sound equipment, computers, recording consoles, recording software, like all that stuff.
Like, so you're like a professor of rock, like
I
school
am
of
I
rock.
am a professor of rock. Yes,
So,
that's
are
my
you
technical
telling me
title.
that
Yeah.
they serious though? You can actually just sit there and then just make up a tune and a song in your head and then start playing it.
I mean, kinda. That's
Cause,
kind of the point. Yeah,
ah,
yeah,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? I just wish I could so much because it's such an amazing talent, and you know that's something that like even the people who can't do it, they all
Mhm.
appreciate that talent. Do you know what I mean? Every single person's got to love somebody playing an instrument well. I mean, come on, no matter who you are, music's incredible. I love to dance. I love a boogie. You know, anybody who knows me in real life knows that's a fact. So
Yeah,
yeah,
man.
awesome.
Yeah. So I play my primary instrument is guitar, but like I play a little bit of a lot of different instruments. So I play uh some lap steel and piano and a little bit of mandolin and dobro.
Damn.
So like but I have these string instruments around. They're all kind of similar, and if you can play one and kind of connect some dots, you can be a little proficient on the other. And so the last album I did called Mountain Time, I played all the instruments instead of drums and bass, but there's a lot of like mandolin and dobro and some lap steel and stuff like that on there. Um,
That's freaking sick.
yeah.
Yeah, love it. Singing too, it just blows my mind. It's like how I feel making a really good episode once it's edited really good and it's got some good music in that. I do feel a little bit high once that's fully published because that's the closest I'll ever get to like making a song or like a record or anything, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I know it seems like a magic trick to people who can't do it, or people who have tried and maybe have, you know,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I totally get that, because it was something that seemed very elusive to me when I was younger, and it was like a puzzle I had to figure out. And once you do it the first couple times, you're really excited about those results, and then you get kind of a shock when you realize the stuff you've written wasn't very good at all, and actually writing is very challenging. And now you understand that like you could write 50 more songs, and none of them would be something you'd hear on the radio, perhaps. And what does it take to get to the point where your ability to discern is on the level with creating something out of thin air on your coffee table with like a pen and a paper and a guitar, something that can move people, affect people, that can be remembered and maybe hummed along to later on or taken with them, like music is and songwriting specifically is like what led me to all other aspects of music. I consider myself at my core a songwriter. So yeah, it's a magic trick, dude, and it's part of me considers it my magic trick, but like it's not a magic trick that I even control as well. Like I'm still at this stage after having written songs for like 20 fucking years, I'm still, like debating on a daily basis like is this a muscle that you have to work out with discipline every day and commit yourself to a sort of habitual writing technique? Or is it something that comes in waves like a muse that you have to take while the iron's hot or whatever, while you have to, do with it what you can when you can, whenever it comes
mm,
along? So maybe it's a little bit of both. I don't know. But like, some of the songs that and it's not even me that I am the judge on it. It's like the songs that people come to me afterwards and tell me that touch them. Like a lot of those songs, they might come to me in like 20 minutes. Sometimes they just come to you. So it's just a matter of how much of a like of an antenna or a receptor for that sort of thing can you make of yourself, you know? So part of the reason why I have guitars up is like I just want to be able to like grab a guitar. I don't need to pull one out of a case. That's an extra step. You know, it's if I feel it and I want to play, I want to be able to reach for it and I want it to be playable right then and there, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's interesting. And thoughts on that kind of mysticism behind music, like how we receptors or can it be like practiced? So, I mean, we've only got a couple more questions here, but I guess let's just lead that into my next question here that I wanted to throw at you on the fly.
Yeah.
Because I know that you're into your philosophy, as we talked about earlier. So let me ask you this question. Are you an existentialist or do you believe in free will?
Oof. Yeah. Well, there's a guy that has a podcast called Into the Void, and he recently, and I forget his name, but he was recently on a podcast called What's Left of Philosophy. And I have been seriously thinking about the points that he's brought up since then. So when you ask me if I'm an existentialist or if I believe in free will, much of what I have to say on that would come directly from that conversation that happened on that podcast episode. But
Oh, you were on
when
this podcast
I was
episode?
I was not on that podcast episode, but the things that were said on there have really started to shape the way I've been thinking about a lot of things. And it's more Spinoza and determinism than it is like sort of Sartre and free will. And the reason why I say that is because like there are so many. There was like there's a Thomas Nagel wrote a paper called Moral Luck, I want to say, and he talks about certain aspects of moral luck. Like there are certain things like a lottery of existence, right? So like we don't get to choose like where we're born, our gender, who our parents are, what the regionalism of practice of conventional, practices are. There's a lot of things that we don't get to choose, right? And if you are already on the political left, then you're probably already inclined to believe that all of these sort of play in as factors to the opportunities one receives in life, and you're already predisposed to the notion that there are so many things that are not directly our fault due to choices or what have you that will determine certain ways and outcomes of our life. So to that extent, I don't think it's a very far walk from being on the left and thinking that there's like this lottery that most people don't win. Uh, it's not a very far walk from people being born into systems and institutions and situations not of their choosing over to everything is determined and there is no such thing as free will. It's a shorter walk than one might imagine. So that aspect to think that like even that yeah I'm able to like get up and make slight modifications to my environment, but there are ultimately things that cause me to make those modifications in my environment, right? There are things that cause me to make these choices that are still things that are beyond my control that I have no say into, that I did not agree to, that I inherited of simply just being here in the thrownness of our existence, So yeah, like, do I believe? I think it's more. I think it's more Spinoza than Sartre myself too, and I've been leaning more that way ever since that I've listened to that conversation. So, but yeah, I mean, there's part of me that's still really attached to this beautiful idea of free will and the radical individualism of Sartre and the sort of body without organs of Deleuze and these sort of like we contain multitudes. We are a non-totalizable, intensive multiplicity, as like Taylor from Machinic Unconscious Happiness Happy Hour would say. But yeah, dude, like that's a really interesting question, and it's wild because I think I'm more on the determinism side of things now than I am with the radical individualism.
Yeah, it certainly sounds that way. So, who did you say was the most recent authors who have talked about determinism?
Thomas Nagel, who wrote the stuff about like moral luck and like constitutive luck and all these things. He basically wrote about all these different things that are like beyond our control that we inherit.
And
You know,
Sartre was talking about free will.
Sartre. I mean, all of Sartre is like this radical individualism of free will. I feel like I mean, Sartre is he is the sort of. I mean, he's the guy who speaks to the uh existence precedes essence, and so like like this eternal external uh judgment of the good, this sort of external telos of the cosmos is non-existent, and man is is here and knows not where he's been, knows not where he's going, and knows not why he's here, and that man is the sole container of the good. All of that to me is very Sartre, and what I take from Sartre in that aspect. But yeah, that's also it's also very it's also a large, it's out of Heidegger and Nietzsche, really, like the death of God and the and Dasein and all that stuff. Sartre took a lot of that stuff from being in time into being in nothingness.
Yeah, sick. So there you go. Thank you for those suggestions. Our listeners do have resources to go to if they want to dig into those questions more. I do, in particular, because I want to get my head around it. I want to understand the meaning of life and why we're here and everything to do with shit like that. So yeah, I've got my own thoughts on it, but
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
we'll,
it's not a
we'll
very it's not a very optimistic perspective that Sartre has to offer. I mean, when I say optimistic, I mean he's like, oh yeah, free will, radical individualism. You can make meaning yourself and make yourself into the you're the sole arbiter of the good, right? So you can make yourself into this thing which you consider good, and all that is optimistic. But man, like that we are in a that we exist within an indifferent cosmos, a cosmos that is indifferent to us, that we are alone, and that there is no external telos for our existence or a source of objective morality, that we're alone in this, and crying out for meaning in the sort of Albert Camus sort of sense, that man asks for meaning and there's the indifferent cosmos which refuses to yield it to us. Like that is there's not a whole lot of optimism in that sort of atheist existentialist sort of perspective. But I
Mm.
kind of live in that area, and I do think that there is a radical freedom to be found within a sort of materialist atheism that is goes beyond, I think, where a lot of atheists would leave. Because like a lot of atheists still purport to believe in like a soul or karma or reincarnation to a certain degree. And, I follow the existentialists where that's, to the utter sort of sense of temporality, that life is all that we have is here and now. And that it could be taken from us, and end like a book mid sentence, and like a novel without any sort of resolution or cleaning up of untold things. Like it's life is temporal to me, and that forms this outlook of like these, at least for me, that like while I'm here I have to create art and beauty and goodness in the world and encourage solidarity, uh and so it's, I don't know, man, it's like it's not a very optimistic, like I said, perspective or ideology to have, but it's one that creates a sense of urgency to create beauty and art and sort of beauty in the world, so
Yeah, thank you for that. Also, just proving to me just how much I need to just get my um philosophy of life, or what I think of life and reality, just out on a microphone, and maybe just start discussing those super existential questions with people, because I think that would be really fun and interesting.
sure.
Okay. Maybe between us we can just kind of just have some, just throw some thoughts out there of what we'd like to see once we've finally won this world.
Oh,
So that's it. We're building utopia, socialism, communism, you name it, something along them lines. What are we gonna see?
So if we're building a utopia, if the revolution's tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, the revolution's done and the utopia is built, and then the day after that, what do we want to see in the utopia? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if everything's already taken care of, and then I would love to see some like sober bars. I would love to see like a place where like people can go to have a wide selection of non-alcoholic beer and sit and read in normal noise levels, uh, and like normal volume music. And I would like to be able to sit and enjoy a non-alcoholic beer and read in a bar setting, uh, without drunk people.
Like
Since
I gotta
everything's
tell
already
you,
taken care of, you know.
like I first had my non-alcoholic beer around the Palestine Action Campfire, and I gotta tell you, it just tasted like just beer. It was like, and it was just like pleasant because I was having like a cigarette as well. I don't know whether you included that in
Oh
your
yeah, yeah,
vision
sure.
as
Yeah.
smoke free, but yeah, it was enjoyable. It was pleasant. It was like the same kind of atmosphere, but yeah, you just don't have the drunkenness. What else would you like to
Yeah,
see?
yeah, man. What else would I would like to see? Yeah, I would like to see I mean that's really all I got, man. It's just a place where I can have a non-alcoholic beer without drunk people and have a book, you know.
Yeah,
Um
I gotta
yeah,
say
I
I've
mean
never considered it.
yeah, I mean
And
there's no it's like there's no place for like sober people to congregate and have you know, have a beer or something, a fake beer,
oh
you know.
shit! Now that you mention it, yeah, there's only a few places, isn't he? Wow, never thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. I think I mean I've spent a lot of time in bars playing music and stuff like that. I consider bars like a place where I go and work, you know. But I would say that like since I've stopped drinking a couple years back, I do miss like the bar vibe and the scene. I just, you know, most of the time non-alcoholic beer is an afterthought at these places. And while that's okay, I understand that and I'm not like my major point in contention with world politics is not that we need more selections of non-alcoholic beer, obviously, right? But if the utopia was like done and everything was taken care of, then I would be like, yeah, can we just get some fucking non-alcoholic beer in this fucking joint so that people like me can sit around and like pretend to drink and still enjoy like that sort of I don't know, the shared feeling of everyone ingesting a cocktail or something, you know? Uh 'Cause I kind of miss that, you know?
If I'm ever over there, stateside, I'll have a non-alcoholic beer with you.
Yeah, I would love that, man. I can find some real shitty non-alcoholic beer for us to have. Somehow
You too.
the shittier the beer now, the better it is. I don't understand that either. Like you know, when I was drinking, I'd want to have like nice IPAs, and now I'm like, oh shit, is that non-alcoholic Bush Light? That's this is this is great, man. I can't believe you have this. This is wonderful. You know, it's like yeah, I can't explain it, but the shittier the beer is now, the better.
Yeah, I've got no standards, but either way, get high off the people.
Like American beer is like having sex in a canoe. It's fucking close to water.
You know what? I think I've heard that one before, but I've never heard it with American beer. But the image you just put in my mind of American beer, it just makes me feel sorry for you, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, I feel you, man. I'm not drinking the stuff anymore now. I'm just drinking this shitty non-alcoholic stuff. It doesn't get you drunk. It's like booze. It just doesn't get you drunk. It still makes you want to pee and bloats you, but like you know, whatever, man. It still tastes like shit. It's great. So
Sick.
yeah,
Okay,
man.
let me throw in one more final question before the
Yeah, one
plug.
more question. Cool.
Right, so thanks. So How are things looking over there? Does it look like you're gonna have a revolution over there in the next what month, year, 10 years? What's it looking like? What's the practice like? Are there any organizations that stick out as particularly being vanguard, or does it just seem like a fucking hopeless struggle?
I mean, yeah, that's a rough question. What does it look like in the United States? Are we going to have a civil war? Is it going to be a revolution? 10 years, 20 years? Is there a vanguard party? Man, I don't know that there's no single party on the left which could be uh, a leader of the revolution in terms of organization, people strength, or
Not one.
ness. No, there's not one at all, man. Um, I mean, I'm a member of CPUSA, and I want to say that, like, of any of them, like the most spread out, networked, organized, and capable on the left is CPUSA. But there's CPUSA is not preaching a violent overthrow or preparing for a revolution. I mean, they're not doing any subversive activities. So, like, if you're talking about a civil war and is there a vanguard party to overthrow the U.S. government, there's really nothing in play in the United States like that right now. Everyone is so alienated and economically oppressed to where, like, no one can see further than the hand in front of their face for the paycheck they need to survive. And it's rough, man. It is really rough out here. And with inflation being the way that it is, and the housing crisis, I mean, the housing market is about to fucking bubble up and burst in this country too. A second ago, gas prices were also, doing similar things to the middle class. And, I was telling, a buddy of mine, it used to be like the joke that, like, Chris Farley is like, I live in a van down by the river. And then, like, within like 10 years, all the sort of people in my generation, like millennials, are now all like, yeah, man, if I'm lucky, I can save up a few grand and buy a van to live down by the river at this point. I mean, it's become a question of, like, in 2008, it was like, who is going to, I mean, who's going to be unlucky and lose their home? And now it's like, who's going to be the lucky one that's going to be able to keep their home at this point? I mean, it's economic conditions are terrible in the United States. And, when you say, is there going to be a civil war? I don't know if there's really going to be a civil war, but there may be a form of, like, a slow moving national divorce, especially if Trump wins in 2024. Just as I think, like, the blue states here aren't going to have enough reason to play the game with the conservative states. Like, there's already a sort of sentiment of blue states breaking away on grounds of Roe v. Wade, and preserving, additional rights or something. So, like, there's been some chatter about that in articles I've read about. I mean, especially in the Atlantic talked about the possibility of blue states breaking away. So yeah, shit's rough in the United States, economically, socially, um, and it's midterms are coming up. Great, we get to hear about that starting soon. After the midterms, it's all 2024 2-year election cycle bullshit, and it's all awful. Everything is terrible. And but thanks for asking about it, because I'm sure you guys will hear enough about it in your neck of the woods too, that it's like, fuck, dude, why do y'all have to listen to stuff about elections 2 years out, in a country that's has an overweighted influence in the way the entire world is organized? So yeah.
I mean, I've certainly got my criticisms of the US population who are armed to the teeth to overthrow tyrants. Like, um, it's in their own constitution, but for some of the many socio-economic reasons that you mentioned, these people just literally aren't given enough calories to have the energy to even want to fucking revolt. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's the same in jails. They're literally given enough just so they fucking can't fight back. With this, and people, I'm begging you, and genuinely begging you, people, like, listening, especially people in the States, and we have got a bigger listener audience in the United States rather than the UK, and that frustrates me. But still, listen, people, like, we talk about these communist organizations, they're making a lot of money off like membership dues. You know, a lot of people give them money. Where does that go? Just put it towards serving the people. Yes, the people are hungry. Go and serve them. Go and focus on the community. Meet the needs where the needs can be met, so that they've got the energy to turn the fucking hunger from capitalism into a hunger for socialism. These are some of the strategies we need to do. It was good enough for the fucking Black Panther Party, and it's fucking good enough for us today. We just need to focus on it. It's you know, these Zoom meetings and, you know, these stalls selling papers aren't gonna go nowhere if we're not meeting the fucking masses' needs and building the communities. Right, so thank you so much for all of that and deeply well thought out answers, great answers for those questions there. Can people get plugs? Where can they go, follow, and support you, Jules Taylor, please?
Well, thank you, comrades, for having me on once again. I really enjoyed our time together, and I'm happy to, come on again if I'd be invited and talk to you about whatever it is you want to speak about. It was a fun time. So my name is Jules Taylor, and I host a podcast called No Easy Answers. It's a Marxist podcast about politics, philosophy, and the human condition. You can find that anywhere you find your podcast. I'm also a musician. You can just search my name in any of the major streaming platforms and search up Jules Taylor. And you find my music there. You can probably find my podcast in the same spot too. And I'm most active on Twitter, so you can follow me at Real Jules Taylor. And other than that, I mean, I have links on any of those locations, and I would welcome any stalkers that may want to find out more about me. I'm talking to you, breaking the fourth wall. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you so